We've arranged strategic items to consider today, particularly in relation to delivery of our priorities. Our anti-poverty work and updating the financial outlook for the Council from the Section 95 officer. I intend to deal with the reports in front of us in an appropriate manner, and I look forward to a constructive debate. However, before we move on to the agenda, I want to make a few comments regarding the recent referendum in the UK's membership of the European Union. The outcome of the EU referendum is clearly a significant one for people living across the UK, and our region is no different. Building our economy and creating living wage jobs that are sustainable are our top priorities at Council, and the result of the referendum brings huge uncertainty for our residents, business and employees. How the impact of the referendum may be mitigated in the future by the Council, Scottish or UK governments is still uncertain, and this presents a further significant risk to our financial planning in such times of austerity. In particular, the impact of economic growth could have a major negative effect on the forthcoming spending review and subsequent financial settlement from the Scottish Government. There are also a number of main programmes and activities that are currently funded through the EU, so may be impacted on by the result of the referendum. Some specific Council programmes funded from the 2014-2020 EU funding programmes include the European Social Fund for Employability, and that's worth about £7 million. The European Regional Development funding worth about £1.4 million, and the LEADER programme worth £6.1 million. These grants alone support about 50 staff directly employed on delivering these schemes, and many more partners rely on this and other funding to support employment. Not being able to provide assurance on their future to these key groups is a major concern. In the past, European structural funds have played a major role in development within our region, such as the A75 improvements and forestry routes programme. European grants also underpin current critical national infrastructure projects such as broadband rollout. In addition, the Council has agreed to be a part of the proposed Business Loan Scotland, which was to include European Regional Development Fund. For the wider partnership, there are also national programmes delivered by Skills Development Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, Visit Scotland and the Scottish Funding Council, which will be affected. Further, there are implications for our universities in relation to EU-funded research grants. For a fragile rural economy, there are significant funds disbursed by the Scottish Rural Development Programme, including farm payments and land management programmes. These affect some 2,000 businesses and represent over £85 million for common agricultural payments alone in 2015. The third sector may also be affected in relation to access to social enterprise development. Given the potential impact on our region, the Chief Executive has already commissioned a piece of work to consider in more detail the risk to our local economy, any legal and social implications, and the risk to previously agreed and future funding streams. This will be informed by the emerging national picture and will be reported to members at the earliest opportunity. Clearly, negotiations to implement the decision to leave the EU have obviously not yet begun, and we are at very early stages of that process. Therefore, these funding streams will continue for the time being and may indeed continue for some years. However, I give a commitment I will lobby both the UK and Scottish Government to ensure that they take whatever action is required to protect these projects and funding for the lifetime of these projects. I also know that the trade unions are concerned at the possible impacts the referendum result may have on employment rights. As a lifelong trade unionist, I can also give this commitment to our unions, that for as long as I'm leader, this Council will do all we can to protect workers' rights and lobby government to ensure they do so. A full briefing note has been produced for members on the potential impact of the result, and I will ask for copies to be circulated. As I have indicated, and as and when the picture becomes clearer, a report on the impact of the referendum result will be brought before members. Thank you. Okay, going to item 1, the Sederunt apologies. Rona?
Thank you, Leader. We have apologies from Councillors Carruthers, Carson, Collins, Yen, McKee, Marshall, Smith and Tate, and Councillor Wiper is not present at the start of the meeting.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any members have any declarations of interest? No? Can we move on to item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the 24th of March 2016. This is up for approval and I'll move.
Second.
Okay, if we move on to item 4, this is the Unaudited Accounts 2015-16. It's a report by the Head of Finance and Procurement. The purpose of this report is to ensure compliance with the relevant regulations in effect. We need to ensure that the draft accounts are submitted to the Council and then submitted to the Accounts Commission by no later than the 30th of June. As in previous years, the unaudited accounts have been circulated to members this morning. You should all have copies of both sets of accounts in front of you. As members are aware, Audit and Risk Management Committee will examine the accounts and the external audit of these in due course. Paul is here to answer any questions or clarify any issues members may have. Members? Andrew?
Thank you, Leader. It was to ask in 3.5, how will we inform the public? What is the mechanism and vehicles that you will be using?
Paul?
Yep. We'll actually kick off a public inspection process, which will start this Friday. It's a 3-week period, and information will be available to the public through the website and through libraries and local offices.
Okay, no other members. Can we note the report? Item 5, Financial Strategy Overview, Financial Challenges. When full Council recently agreed its budget in 2016-17, every member of this Council was fully aware of the difficult decisions we had to take and recognised that we would face even more difficult decisions in the future to sustain vital priority services and balance our finances. The report in front of us today provides the Head of Finance and Procurement's overview of the very difficult challenges we have ahead, which we all need to respond to. The information in the report is very helpful in ensuring all members are focused on these matters and fully appraised of what lies ahead in determining our budget for 2017-18. Officers are asking the recommendations that political groups engage with the agreed budget process and determine their priorities and proposals for the budget development. When we come to the recommendations, I intend to come back to this point as we have a new budget setting process that requires earlier engagement for members. I appreciate that last year the level of cuts from the Scottish Government was unprecedented, but it was still unacceptable that some groups were demanding detailed savings options almost at a deadline to submit budgets. If you want to propose a budget in February, then you need to start now. At paragraph 4.1, the local government finance settlement is highlighted as a key influence on the scale of the challenge we face, and also the conditions or requirements the Scottish Government set on any funding we might receive. Given our Council's experience of the scale and depth of cuts faced in 2016-17 and the impact of the conditions set for local government funding last year, along with the fact that local government is unlikely to be a priority for the Scottish Government in its spending review, we need to prepare ourselves for more massive cuts in our grant from government next year. The advice we have is that the extent of reduction we experienced last year, a £21 million cut, provides at the very least an indication of the level of reductions we may face again this year. It is now very clear that simply trimming budgets at the edges will not deliver the savings we have to find. We need to be honest with the public And ask the straightforward question, what services do you want us to stop providing? We just don't have the budget to continue to provide everything we currently do. As well as setting out the likely financial challenges we will face next year, the report also outlines proposed changes to council tax and income tax from April 2017. As the report highlights, the Scottish Government has committed that much of the funding will be directed straight to schools or to increase free childcare provision. We are advised at this stage we do not have information on how this will impact on the overall settlement and distribution of funding for our region, but I do fear that we could see resources once again being removed from Dumfries and Galloway to other parts of Scotland. At the very least, we need to begin preparations now to make savings again next year, probably anywhere between £10 to £20 million. Paul is here to answer any questions arising from the report. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I think if your statement on this report had been issued as it was last year, it might have been a degree of relevance. I think basically things that the budget process has been overtaken by events. I don't think any of us have any idea how much we're going to get, how much we have to save. The whole thing is largely up in the air. There's one thing I think, probably the only thing that's certain that might be useful to groups in the meantime, is what the cumulative savings are at the moment. It would be useful to have that just now, but quite honestly, I don't think as any of us can actually start making budget preparations, let alone the Scottish Government just at this stage, given the events of last week.
Ivor.
Chair, it's maybe a similar vein to Councillor Dick there. The fact of the matter is, we're being asked by the end of this month to have our priorities as councillors with the officers so they can go and look at areas that we want to protect. Well, my understanding from the budget settlements we've had in the past, well, education's got to be protected. The IJB funding that we had before hits out of our hands now, and they will decide in their budget. So we're left with what's in community services and EE&I. Now, that's a big hit on those two services. We may be able to look at some areas of education if it's got to be tied to teacher numbers. There may be other places we can look. But we don't have the ability to actually put our priorities. It's our priorities within a framework of what we can touch rather than what we can't touch. I think it's difficult for us, and we've actually had the case where we're now, as Ian said, in a different position. We don't know what the budget will be. We don't know if there will be a major effect in the next 6 months that will affect our budget going forward. We might have, as was said to us, an emergency budget in the back end, which could put the whole ball up in the slates, as they say. Now, I would like to think that we could start to look at services where we have to find savings, because if it's going to be as bad as what everyone's forecasting, then the sooner we get onto this job, the better, because the longer we leave it, the further we have to cut to make the same savings. We went round our room today, what's your priorities? And I think there was 5 different answers on the priorities. 2 of them were the education and social work, which we can't touch. We would have to prioritise them anyway. So it leaves you looking at where are you going to make the savings, and there's not that much space for them in other areas. Like you say, we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions, and it's something we as a council will have to take serious consideration over. And the timescales that we're looking at in here are very tight, and I think we need to have a more detailed sort of idea of what we have to do by what time, because by this report we've got 2 days in which to get our priorities to you by the end of June. Now, I don't know if we can achieve that Then we've got to have reviews, which will be through the process in the next couple of weeks, at committees for the service plans. They will come forward. But we actually need to be looking to address some of these pressures now. So the service plans that we may implement will have to change through the year. And I think that's something we have to address. This is not going to be easy, and I'll tell you, when we first came in here as a councillor in 1999, we used to have bun fights over where we were going to spend the extra money to increase our services. This will be the hardest budget I think we've had to face in maybe 17, 18 budgets I've had to put my name to.
Thank you. I know we do have ongoing, uncertainties, but we've got a responsibility to provide services as well, and we've got a responsibility to set out what the priorities of them services are. This is not new. It's something that we brought up in the budget process about looking at our priorities. So it's not just 2 days. It is a few days' time. It's something we have known about, something we should have been thinking about. And I think this, a lot of these things are starting to focus the mind of councillors now, which maybe we've been a bit lackadaisical, or some people have been taking it, we'll do it next week or we'll do it the week after. I think I did try before, during the last budget and the last process, to make people aware of the challenges we have in front of us. But doing nothing or delaying, we've got a process in place, we've got a communication process, we've got a public engagement process, we've got all these things ongoing, and delaying that. The Scottish Government actually knew or know they had a 3-year budget from the UK Government, so they know what finances were in place. So that finance is in place for the next couple of years, and we can't second guess what's going to happen. There is all this uncertainty because of the EU referendum. Not something I wanted to be, a part of coming out of Europe. But we are where we are just now. We can't just sit back and do nothing. We've got to go forward with our business and try and protect as much as we can in the council and find out what these priorities are. Paul?
Just really to echo those comments in terms of, the developments of the last few days add further uncertainty. I don't think it changes the overall thrust of the report, because the terms of the report are that we know that the council is facing substantial funding reductions over the upcoming period, and it's important that we now begin to identify our priorities to allow proposals to be brought forward to try and balance the budget for next year. While the Scottish Government do have 3-year figures at the moment, there's a meeting between COSLA and the Cabinet Minister next week to get a handle on whether or not the recent decision will impact on the timing or the period that the upcoming Scottish Spending Review will cover, and also the content in terms of level of funding. But I think that the job for us really is, we know we're facing a reduction in funding. We really need to get on with delivering that for the next financial year, which is only no less than 9 months away now.
Ian?
Thanks, Leader. I agree with some of the comments that have been made, and suppose just kind of going back to, there's a relevance, kind of high importance on this when it comes to about getting this into place and getting it structured. But going back to the last year's budget setting process, I mean, my group was the first group to come forward and start talking about the budget when it come to this. We were the first group to put in an actual budget plan as well. Our proposals were first on the table to be considered, and we put forward simple proposals like £1 million worth of savings through the establishment of an ALIO. But instead we chose, the council decided to choose things like the removal of classroom assistants and so on and so forth. So I mean, I think you've got an administration in the council, you've stood up to the mark, up to now you've done a reasonable job, I would say. You need to continue that level of leadership and take it forward. I mean, at this point, no way, and with the spending cuts that are coming in, and the level of funds that will be awarded over the next few months, and it's no clear at this point in time, and the narrow gap that we've got, the small amount of services we're actually looking at, could my group sign up to the actual timelines contained within this report?
I've actually agreed to that process before, but anyway. Andy?
Thanks, Leader. I actually agree with you that we have a duty to set a budget, and that process needs to be set out as it is. I would maybe suggest we need a wee bit of flexibility to reflect the emergent situations as they arise, because it would certainly have helped if the UK government had been more decisive in their leadership at this moment in time, rather than deciding to resign months down the line, and that will knock back any potential new budget coming out of Westminster, which would have an effect on the Scottish Government.
Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, we agreed as a council a budget setting process. Now, we know there are major reductions coming in funding towards councils. We have to lead in this area, making sure that we have a budget setting process for those that we represent out there in Dumfries and Galloway to go forward. Delaying that process isn't going to help. We also know that some areas will be ring-fenced. So we need to look at those areas, as you said, Leader, that we can't do anymore. And it's as simple as that. And I think perhaps a suggestion here is that looking at those areas where we can't touch and looking at those areas where we can is the starting point for perhaps the groups to receive a written piece of information from officers to say, this is areas what you need to really be looking at, rather than the areas that you don't look at. And that will start the process, because this whole budget is a live process. It's going to change as we go through. And we had that flexibility in at the start of the budget setting process. So I think it's a case of getting on with the job, finding out exactly what we can't touch, what we can touch, and then move forward.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, and I think that we've got to look at it. We've got to look at it alongside the programme that we've set ourselves, and I think that was set up policy and resources, and the programme that we are to follow, with a consultation with the communities, the public, and so forth. And it is a very narrow window, indeed, when we don't know what the settlement is going to be. But I think running alongside this as well is that not knowing what the settlement, once we do know the settlement, is how we mitigate the effect of that budget. So I think we've seriously got to look at that as well. I know last year there was a decision not to look at the reserves, but I think that we've seriously got to look at that to see how we do mitigate to what Archie said there, in terms of the people we represent and the priorities that we would want to deliver. And so I would hope that the Council will look at how we do mitigate whatever settlement is produced.
Stephen?
Thanks, Leader. Just under 6.4, where it's talking about the public engagement. Now, there's a sort of move towards participatory budget setting, and I believe there's a fund around about I think it's 1.5 million being put forward, where 750,000 of that is available to bid into from the likes of the local authority to enhance or support how we do participatory budget setting for like local communities, how we sort of engage with that. And I think there's a share of that money which is for community groups to bid into as well. What are we going to do to embrace that sort of opportunity there to, I suppose, modernise the way we set our budgets and take on board sort of true community engagement?
Thanks, Chair. Yep, last week the Chief Executive convened a meeting of senior officers, including myself, to discuss participatory budget and the opportunities that are coming forward through the availability of that funding, and also the requirements on local authorities from April next year in terms of exposing part of the budget to participatory budgeting. So we're currently looking at proposals to develop that, taking into account community groups and how we would link in to the public engagement exercise that the Council's already agreed to try and ensure that we use the opportunity through participatory budgeting, and that does influence us going forward. What I would say is, though, at this stage, I think that the impact of that will be fairly marginal for next year's budget process. I think it's a greater opportunity for future years, and I don't think it will materially change the challenge we've got in front of us today.
Jill?
Thank you, Leader. I do think it's important that what Ivor and Archie had to say, I think it's important that we do have a note from the officers as to exactly where we can look at this present moment in time. And obviously, when the budget comes down the line and we know what's happening, then it's a case of managing and not mitigating, because we have to manage what we're actually given. And in some instances, we are not able to mitigate.
Well,
Yes, Leader, I'm absolutely happy to provide any further information that members think would be helpful in terms of identifying areas where they could make savings. So I'll make sure that comes out as quickly as possible. I think members have got a good understanding of where the restrictions are at the minute. There won't be a huge amount of additional information in there, but we'll try and give you as much detail and clarity as possible, and also take into account some of the recent developments in terms of Scottish Government policy as well.
Jane?
Thank you, Leader. You set the national context to this, and I thank you for that. I think it's terribly easy for us to sit in a room like this thinking about our budget, and that, of course, will be the danger, that we don't, in fact, consider the regional angle to this, because we have partners, and it's not absolutely clear to me in this budget setting process how we make certain that we align with what they are proposing, because we don't know what they'll be doing in their budgets, and really having to align our priorities with theirs. Everybody understands it's obviously an incredibly difficult thing we're going to have to do, but I do echo the sentiments of another member who suggested that we are going to have to think about doing things in a different manner, possibly setting up different structures and looking at this in a different manner. And that will not be something that people want to hear, but I think we've got to at least consider that in the context of a region-wide community planning structure, strategic planning structure. And that's not absolutely clear from this particular series of agreed budget process as to where and how that will be done.
This is a budget process that, you know, all political groups agreed to. We've agreed to determine the priorities and proposals, and it's up to each individual group to do that. You know, and what we're asking here today is, you know, that you urgently address that decision, so that, you know, so that officers and the council can get a clearer idea of where they're going and what we want to achieve as a council and where we are going in the future. So it's something we have agreed. It's in there. It's in the words within that. You know, maybe if you want further information on various aspects of that, then, you know, you will have that. Rob?
Thank you, Leader. Appreciate your statement at the beginning and the document that you've circulated. I think very timely and helpful. Thank you. Probably one of the few times I'll be pleasant to you in the 8 or 9 years, but that is much appreciated at this juncture. I just wanted to effectively check a process matter. Mr. Garrett referred to the updates and the meetings that he will be having, along with presumably other directors of finance, etc. And no doubt COSLA will also be taking part as things become clearer, or when things become clearer. Without doubt, there's a fair amount that we don't know at this point. What I just wanted to check, although I'm sure it would be your intention, is that as well as the administration receiving regular updates on what's happening with that information is also shared with other groups at the same time, given not least the degree of urgency that you rightly pointed to in the process. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, sorry if I didn't make that explicit. That will happen. Andy.
Thanks, Leader. I'm actually pleased that Archie and Ivor's intervention in this, because I think what we do need, when we're getting the report back on the areas where we have a statutory duty to provide, that we're absolutely clear on the process to assess the level of support or commitment we are required to give. because there is no blanket organisation thing in social work, for example, where that is covered by statute. Yes, but it's based on the assessment of what the need of that individual is, not the want, by the way. Can we make sure when that comes forward that it actually explains to us exactly how each of the departments then assess the level of support that people require to meet the legal requirements? It's a subtle point, but I think it's an important one.
Absolutely, I think it's important because obviously we need to stop things, but we also need to be more realistic in the service levels we can support, as I'll have fewer and fewer and fewer staff to actually deliver it. And developing partnership arrangements take an awful lot of time and presents additional risks. I think the one I would say is that the Education Act says we have to provide education, doesn't tell us how, apart from the fact I've got to have that number of teachers. So in fact, we don't need to have schools if we don't want them. So I think that it's how you define it. I think what we'll work with you and with the groups is to try and put into some plain English exactly what our professional view is and how low can we go. But also I think how low are we required to go? Because I think there's a difference between regulation, guidance and law. And I think that to try and explain that minefield, particularly as you get into areas of children's services and adult services where law is being generated as we speak. So we'll try, and I'll work with Paul to ensure we get as comprehensive an outline for each of the services as possible for you.
Thanks for that response, Gavin, and I'm assuming it will be highlighting right across the whole council, not just social work and education, because there are other areas where we've got statutory responsibilities. Just for clarity, yeah.
Yes. Okay, Ivor.
Chair, it's a wee bit to do with the timeline of doing this. You know, we're looking at 15th August deadline for officers to bring forward savings templates directed by members this month and their priorities. We also have the next paper on this agenda is the Council's priorities and commitments. Is that the starting position that officers will be taking, that we will be, you know, because we have taken the decision that these are our priorities? Will they be the ones, and anywhere else members will actually, or officers will be able to go to other services out with the priorities identified in item 6? So that is the direction. We've always had those priorities. So, and I think the priorities were agreed by full council. I'm not sure if it was unanimously or not, but they are there. So we've set priorities in the past. Will that be a starting point?
We're happy to, obviously officers are already starting to think about potential savings areas, and they'll obviously be taken into account the council's agreed priorities as part of that discussion. But that in its own obviously will not provide the level of direction I think officers need to start developing the proposals in earnest. And I think we need a bit more than that overall agreement with the council's priorities to support the development of the process.
It's up to, you know, in the end up, it's up to groups to decide, you know, if they want to come out of some priorities or, you know, not deliver something. And that's part of their process. If they want to put that forward, then they're entitled to do that.
So what level of direction are officers looking for? Is it, we want you to look at this service and find something there, or is it a case of, as a council, we are willing to stop X, Y, and Z, go and work up the budget? Is that what they want? The actual, you know, if somebody decides that they don't want to fill potholes, we're willing to take 5 million out of potholes. That's what officers want, rather than roads infrastructure.
Yes, I think I'm speaking for staff here, that slightly fed up at do a service review and tell you what we want you to cut, because actually then the politics around it is really disillusioning staff as to political direction. What we're asking for is some strategic direction on, we are willing for cuts to be made in that area, and, you know, on those areas, come back and say, as Councillor Scobie says, how you might mitigate it through other work, etc. It's that level of direction, because realistically there's nothing left safe that we can offer up, and this must not become an officer budget. You know, we are willing to bring back the proposals and how you would wish it to be cut, but going forward, and I think to put in context, in 2009 when I joined and the crisis started, this was the year that we were all told that growth would come back into the public sector budgets of at least 1.6%. It was now told by the Permanent Secretary we're now looking towards 2022 before there'll be any growth in the public budget. That was before Brexit. So we're going to be in the next 5 years. So the idea of we'll find alternate savings to deal with the ones you might not like at this point doesn't exist, because they'll have to be taken next year, the year after, the year after. So is that level of, you know, I'm perfectly willing to engage with the groups to talk about that strategic level, that those are the services that you're willing to cut, and our advice would be how low do we think we can go, or completely, and then what mitigation we might or might not be able to put in place with you. And that was where I'd like to start, recognising that, you know, otherwise we're going to ask officers to bring forward templates that you found politically unaccepted before. And I think that, and I'm perfectly willing to enter that dialogue individually with groups, with collections of members, to try and get that direction.
Right, I've got Richard Brody, then Ian Dick, then I've got the recommendations. Richard?
Thanks, Leader. I think we feel another dreadful budget coming on. It's even worse than the last year. I'm just thinking how we could enhance the process procedures so that members can get through it better. Perhaps support us with how we can be supported with more options, and perhaps even achieve a consensus a bit more between all the council. After all, we are all in it together. So I don't know if you remember, but some members from the last council may remember we had a presentation from a professor who outlined how we could go through a process of identify the things that couldn't be cut and the things that could be cut to arrive at a consensus. And I think that would be a good way forward if the Finance Department could facilitate a few sessions where we go look at all the options, and that would inform us. Like everybody else, I've got a reasonable idea of the budget, but I don't have a detailed idea of the budget. So I think I've written to the head of finance, and I wonder if he's got a response to that.
Yeah, no, thanks. I received Councillor Brody's note yesterday. I mean, I do recall the exercise that was undertaken, I think it was 8 or 9 years ago, and I don't think members found it particularly helpful overall, and we didn't actually follow it up at that stage. But I mean, as I said earlier, happy to provide any information that members find helpful in terms of supporting them come to that kind of strategic direction that we're looking for. When that session was undertaken a few years ago, we didn't have the kind of information available to members that we have now. We've developed activity-based budgeting book. Since then, the business plans are far more detailed than they've been previously. And I mean, I think members have got a huge amount of information now available to them on where we spend our money and what we get for that spend. And I don't think the answer's in further detail and further information. Any clarity you need, happy to provide that, but I think we really need to be looking at where we can make the decisions and allowing officers to develop proposals based on that strategic direction.
I think that's the main point. You'll provide clarity, you'll provide information, but in the end up, it's as it makes the decisions. Ian? No, Ian?
No, I'm fine, thanks, Leader. Just if you want to go to the recommendations, quite happy.
Okay, we're going to the recommendations. Can we agree to note and agree? Okay.
Happy to agree, but could we have a sort of time scale as to when we will get the statutory duties to allow us to inform which areas we can look at? Yeah.
Paul?
I don't think I'm looking at a huge exercise there. I'll liaise with the corporate management team, the chief executive on what comes out, but it will build on information that's already available to us and just provide that extra clarity. So I would expect to be able to get stuff out to members, certainly before the member recess, if not before that.
Thank you. Go to item 6. This is the Dumfries and Galloway Council Priorities Commitments. The report presents the progress made in delivering the Council's priorities and commitments over the 4th year of this Council. There's no doubt that the past year has been hugely challenging for our Council, faced with managing the single biggest attack in local government in a generation, with government cuts, the scale of which we've never seen before. However, despite this, as a Council, we remain absolutely focused on our priorities. Building the local economy is our #1 priority, and our new regional economic strategy, in particular our planned investment of £3.5 million a year in delivering a youth guarantee, is delivering that stronger local economy, one in which everyone has equality of opportunity. That strategy is being delivered in partnership with agencies and businesses throughout our new economic leadership team, a clear endorsement from the business community of our commitment to the local economy. As a Council, we are at the forefront of mitigating our region against the worst extremes of austerity, implementing Dumfries and Galloway's first ever anti-poverty strategy, including being the first Council in Scotland to achieve living wage accreditation. The strides we are making in delivering improvements along with our partners in our children's services, as well as a major investment being made in projects such as Dumfries Learning Town and the Dalbeattie Learning Campus, shows real progress in our priority of giving our children the best start in life. We need to build on this investment with more emphasis on closing the attainment gap in education between the most advantaged and most disadvantaged school pupils. It cannot be acceptable that a child's background and whether or not they live in a deprived area influences how they achieve at school. I know that is a view the Scottish Government has said they share, but we now need to see that matched by a fair distribution of government resources to our region to close that attainment gap, rather than the crumbs Dumfries and Galloway have received so far from the Attainment Fund. The progress we are making comes at a time when we are reshaping Council services in line with our priorities. It is a process of considerable change for our Council employees. However, the continuing commitment and contribution of all our staff in realising the ambition in our agreed priorities is vital. I want to place on record my thanks on behalf of the Council for the effort our staff make each and every day to deliver for the people of Dumfries and Galloway, despite the challenging times we face. They should be proud of the difference they make to the lives of the people of the region every day. However, it is also clear that we are asking fewer and fewer people to do more and more, and that cannot continue indefinitely. That's why the forthcoming public consultation on services we should no longer provide will be so important in further prioritising our Council services. The year ahead will undoubtedly bring with it more challenges from further funding reductions to what I fear will be a further centralisation of services away from the local councils. Those changes, however, will not detract away from our focus to continue to deliver on our priorities and ensure that we make Dumfries and Galloway the best place in Scotland to live, learn and work. Gavin's here to answer any questions on the support, and Liz is here as well. Members? Ivor?
Chair, it's just a wee bit of information on what's acceptable within targets on our PIs, because if you look at under commitment 1.2, the first one,
Which page are you on?
Page 38 of 202. We're talking about new business startups of 362 against a target of 400. Well, if it was two less, it'd be 10% below target. Now, there is a bit in the narrative that says that's in line with the rest of the country, but it doesn't address the fact that we're 10% now nearly below target on that one. And there's another one on page 46 of 202, the early intervention for vulnerable groups. Now, status is red in that one, which means we haven't achieved target. The short trend is getting worse, and the interventions were 2 instead of 6. Now, is that a bad report because actually there were only 2 people who needed intervened in, or in an intervention rather than 6? Therefore, other work has shown that we're improving our service, or is it a case of 4 children slipped through the net and they've suffered because we haven't picked them up? Now, it's just, what does that, with the 2 of them, is 10% an acceptable below par or below target figure? Another one, is that a bad report or is it a good one because we've fewer children needing intervention or fewer vulnerable people?
Liz?
Could I pick up just the first point perhaps about tolerances? Whether a target is green, is whether it's on target or whether it's below target, that's set by the business plan. So the tolerance is about whether or not something stays green, even if it's not actually met the target. That's something that's determined by the individual committees. So that particular point is quite often discussed in your members' seminar in advance of the business plan going to committees. But that information is available if you wanted any detail on that. And I'll pass on to Colin for the specific issue about the early intervention for vulnerable groups.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. It might be helpful to members just to explain absolutely what that target's about. Those are 6 targets in relation to PIPS scores, which are scores that children receive when they go into P1. So it's really a record of how they've got on before they reach primary 1. And in those particular scores, we looked at young people who lived in the 20% most deprived areas, and we looked after children, and we simply took 3 targets for each of them around reading, numeracy and phonics. So those were about groups of children and whether they were reaching the same score as the average group of children. And in that case, we found that in 4 of those areas, they weren't doing so. So we're not complacent, we're looking to improve on that, but it, as always, demonstrates that schools alone can't do this and why the children's services and progress with children's services is so important.
Ian?
It's just an observation on the key priorities, Leader. The one thing that strikes me as being missing, and it's not explicitly mentioned, is good business management, including energy efficiency and asset management, which has been a key feature in the budgets that we've created since the formation of the Council after 2012, and I think it somehow should be explicitly mentioned in there.
Very happy to look to see what measure we can produce and take it back to the Service Committee for approval and discussion.
Richard?
Thanks, Leader. Just looking at the key performance indicators, Councillor Hislop was on about commitment 1.2. I'd speak about that as well. The number of new start-up businesses created, but I think another important KPI would be how sustainable are these businesses which we have created. We're investing quite a bit of money in to support them. For example, in 2013-14, we helped to establish new 422 businesses and 433 in the following year. But do we know how many of these businesses that started in these years are actually still operational? So that would be a question on that. Obviously, and the next commitment, 1.3, page 10 of that report, the broadband coverage, that is a big concern for rural villages, certainly where I am. And are we going to? Is the coverage going to be? Are we on track to give full coverage by next year? And finally, on the employment figures, would it be possible to think about including people with disability in our targets there? Because I did attend the disability forum, and there's concerns about accessibility to jobs, not just in Dumfries and Galloway, but throughout Scotland, and how we can perform in allowing more access to jobs for people with a disability.
Okay, Liz.
It might be helpful just to clarify that the indicators and the projects that are in this priorities and commitments report were agreed by full council so that you had a small sort of tight number of indicators and projects to look at when you're reviewing the priorities and commitments overall. There's an awful lot more detail in the department business plans, some of which has been mentioned today, and that complements this priorities and commitments report. So there's a lot more detail, obviously, in the public domain, but what this report is trying to do is just to pick out some of the headline information to give you that overview of how your priorities and commitments are doing. We can certainly...
So can I just get that right? So, for example, in the Startup Businesses question, the detail that goes to the Service Committee. So it's already reported there. Sorry, Liz, I stopped you in mid-flow there.
Just to highlight that certainly these issues we'd be happy to put in some narrative, perhaps, just to give you that reference.
So you'll look at having a reference to that rather than full detail. Then we can go to that. That's fine. Yeah, I think you mentioned broadband as well today, and there's nothing there because I think it is on target. It is on target. Yep.
We're fully confident that we will achieve the 95% target. Actually, there is no target, it's 90%, but we will achieve 95%. And following the recess, I'll bring a report back to Council of how we will then plans to try and get us up to 100% using some partnership work with the Scottish Borders and others. So I can give assurance we're definitely on target to achieve 95%. Within the contract period, working with the Scottish Government and others, I believe we can take that for the superfast higher than that, and we'll also bring proposals back to members on how we then close the gap for the remaining 2 to 3% at the other end. So I'll bring that back following the recess in consultation with the Scottish Government.
Ian.
Thanks, Leader. I mean, I think it's a cheery enough report, this actually. I think we should be praising it to a degree. I think Richard's brought up a valid point in regards to the broadband. Look forward to seeing that report coming back. Something that, I'll just go through the first one I picked up on. Just perception, I think it seemed a bit odd when I read it, when we've got a target for the number of unemployed people in Dumfries and Galloway. We've got a target of 4,100 and we achieved 3,800. And it just looks odd that we've got a big green tick. It's almost like we're trying to get more people unemployed, but that's just a perception thing. It's in regards to telecare, I think, more so, because it's been there for a few years now. We've got a target of 28% in the number of adults.
What page is that on, Ian? Sorry.
That's on page, hasn't it got a number? Oh, it has 56. Page 56, the second bullet point there, P3C2SW03. The telecare, we've got a value of 73.92% and a target of 28%. That seems to be there kind of over a number of years. I used to wonder how would that be adjusted. I imagine that'd be potentially for social work. Should we mention that as a full council, just to say it just looks odd again that it's so far off target. It should be getting adjusted.
Yeah, happy to refer that one to Social Work Services Committee to look at when they're reviewing the business plan.
Stephen.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of questions. On page 42, it has a statistic there, and it talks about the proportion of contributions to our local economy by different sectors. In my simple mind, I would have thought that would be 100% because everybody contributes to the economy. So I'm just wondering what the 30% actually means. And the second thing is, on page 55, there's a statistic there, or a data there relating to the value of additional benefits identified through Fiat and Commission Services, DAGCAS. Now, the target value has gone down since 2014-15, and also the value of the actual additional benefits identified. Is that because there's fewer additional benefits available, or is it because there's fewer people in need? Because because I don't know how to read it in the context of either the unemployment figures, but obviously there's people who are entitled to benefits for a number of reasons, and also the number of people being assisted with debt advice has gone up. So I'm quite finding it hard to get a clear interpretation of how to read that statistic. So I'm just looking for a bit of help with that as well. Thank you.
With regard to the proportion of contributions to our local economy by different sectors, that was designed to demonstrate that we were managing to diverse the different types of contributions to the economy, for example, the food and drink sector, agriculture, forestry. I don't know the exact detail of how that indicator is compiled, but that's what it's trying to measure, to show that there's a wider range of sectors contributing to our economy. I can certainly get more detail of that for you, just what the exact sectors are. With regard to the number of clients assisted with debt advice, that's not necessarily people on benefits. Indeed, there are many people who are not on benefits who access the financial inclusion advice services. So the two are not necessarily directly related.
Thank you, Leader. So I think, but the primary question really is, obviously the target value's changed for the value of additional benefits that we're trying to achieve, and also the actual value achieved has dropped. So it's really to get an indication of what's behind that figure. Is it because there's less people in need of additional benefits that need to be identified, or is it because there's less benefits available now to people to actually get?
I don't know the detail of that, but we can certainly find that out for you.
I think what part of the deliberation when this was being set and lowered was we anticipated the rollout of universal credit, in which the multitude of benefits we could point to disappeared into the single payment. That has been delayed, so that's why actually our performance at 14 point is higher, because we still have not got the full rollout. We were supposed to be one of the first areas to roll out universal credit. Elements of it have been rolled out, so that's why we're not up at the 15. And the second one, even though we are dealing with more people in debt, the average debt because is lower because it's harder to get debt now than it was in the past. So and actually it's almost counterintuitive, but part of the reason working with more people with fewer debt, less debt, because they just can't get it. That's why initiatives in the poverty, like the credit unions, is vital, because if they're not getting it through traditional means, where are they getting it from? So I think there's a very complex landscape. But certainly I expect as we get the full rollout of universal credit, then we'll have to think far more creatively on how we maximise the income from the families. So it's moving off of, it's not about benefits, it's maximising income we'll have to really move into, because, as I say, all of the benefit will be stuck into one single payment. And that's going to have a real complex issue for us, particularly for those in work poverty. So we really will have to start changing the team. The team are already looking at how they change their approach, talking to people in debt of how we could do that. But it's a very complex area. But you're right, I think we perhaps do need a greater narrative around this to explain to members so you can fully understand the complexity of the area through these indicators.
Alistair, then I'm going to the recommendations. Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. Back to page 56, sir, if I may. First KPI, homeless households who have been permanently rehoused as a percentage of all social rented lets. Now, at the top right-hand side of the page, the same page, Leader, there's background information given, which, as far as I'm concerned, is helpful and with which I have no difficulties. The last sentence, however, states that the agreed homelessness improvement plan also includes an action to review the availability of appropriate accommodation across the region, both in terms of location and size. And my questions in relation to that, Leader, would be, what form will this action take? What's the estimated timescale within which it will be carried out? And finally, sir, what forum will it be reported to with presumably the recommendations?
Thanks, Leader. We met with the main RSLs last week, actually, as part of our commitment to the Common House and Register Board, and they were certainly very clear that they join us in our commitment that availability, size, location, quality and type of accommodation across the region is absolutely critical to help us collectively deal with this issue. As Councillor Geddes pointed out, it was part of a priority action in the improvement plan for homelessness and housing options that was agreed by Communities Committee on the 19th of May. We are coming back to Communities Committee in October and also Housing Subcommittee in October of this year that will update on that and hopefully clearly outline exactly the progress that has been made with that. I think the issue is that there is a range of accommodation. It's not necessarily in the right location, it's not necessarily of the right size, and what we're trying to do is balance supply with needs that have been identified across the region. Thanks, Leader.
Grateful for the response, sir.
Okay, no, it's Andrew's name's down there. You're the last one then, Andrew.
Thank you, Leader. It was to really ask for some guidance on 3.6, second last paragraph, where we're talking about engagement with the public. The Council has got a very poor record of engaging with the public on the budget in the past, and it's about, has any thought and consideration been given to how we can improve on past experiences? I'm sure you'll recall yourself, the Chief Exec, that in Lorben Hall, not Lorben Hall, sorry, the Academy Hall, there was a distinct lack of people present. So it's about how we can start to look at a better engagement.
The Council received a full report on the service review of community engagement. Part of the reshaping is actually implementing that. An update being that we've had very constructive conversations led by Liz in her new role with our partners about a single engagement mechanism for the NHS, the police, fire, etc., so that when we go out to engage, we create a single team and a single engagement. And that all came from the service review in which partners, staff and the public were heavily involved. So yes, we have a clear way forward and clear direction from members, and Lizzie's appointment was created to take that service review into action. So yes, we are making progress.
Okay, recommendations are considered, we've considered and take the points in view. Okay. Item 7, it's implementing the Council's anti-poverty strategy. This Council, as you know, is fully committed to tackling poverty and giving practical support and assistance to the most vulnerable people across Dumfries and Galloway. Members will recall that our strategy focuses on practical steps to ensure our resources are targeted to those most in need, helping people out of poverty, improving their quality of life. I am delighted with the progress and welcome the wide range of activity and engagement we have achieved in the last 6 months. I welcome the work of the Tackling Poverty Coordination Group, and in particular the recruitment of service users who have direct experience of poverty to input and advise us on how we can best support, engage and design services that meet the needs of the most vulnerable in society and who are working with us. I fully support the capacity building work that is progressing within the group, and as indicated in paragraph 3.2, 1.4. Harry's here to answer any questions. Archie?
Thanks. Yeah, there's not so much a question, but we as an administration met with the Tackling Poverty Coordination Group in room 2 in the building, and I have to say there is an eagerness of that particular group from as diverse groups as Kate's Kitchen and the drugs and alcohol agencies within the area to try and move this anti-poverty strategy forward. I think the enthusiasm in the room that day from those individual users groups was plain to see, and I think the work that Jamie and Harry and all the team have actually done has benefited this council for that particular thing. So I'm really pleased, as you are, with the progress that this is actually making, and I look forward to the end of the strategy report coming forward and making sure that we as a council can support it.
Thank you. Craig?
Thank you, Leader. Firstly, I will say that I'm very supportive of this strategy. The meeting that we had with the Tackling Poverty Coordination Group was interesting and informative. Hearing at first hand the experiences of the people of the group and listening to their views on how, as a council, we can support and shape our services to offer the right method of helping people deal with and overcome their position in society. A point I raised at that meet and was very well received by the group, and a strategy I think is lacking within our anti-poverty strategy, is poverty prevention. We have identified strategies to help support those already in poverty, but I think poverty prevention is just as important for those on the borderline. These people are hard to reach as they are possibly embarrassed by the stigma and labelling of poverty that society has created. The Tackling Poverty Coordination Group can support the Council in identifying this group of people because of their experiences, and I would ask Council that we develop a prevention strategy that sits within our own anti-poverty strategy. As I have said, this group of people are just as vulnerable and lost and deserve the support of this Council. As in many issues these days, we say prevention is better than cure. And if this Council can help in prevention, then I think that is a positive way to support the people of Dumfries and Galloway. And when we come to the recommendations, Leader, I would like to add a sentence to that if members agree. Thank you.
Liz.
I'll perhaps pick that point up about the vision of the anti-poverty strategy does indeed highlight the importance of prevention, that there are three parts to your anti-poverty work. One is to prevent people falling into poverty. The second issue is to support people who are experiencing poverty to get out of it. And the third one is about making sure that our services and information is available to help people to get out of poverty quicker than perhaps they would otherwise have done. So the point about prevention is absolutely very well made, and the third objective about accessing information and services, many of the projects and the issues in there are about making sure that people have got access to, indeed, as we talked about earlier, debt advice and other issues to make sure that they don't fall into poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, thanks, Liz, for that. I appreciate that. I think one of the points that I was making, though, is that, yes, that the information and services and the access is available. This Council may be providing that, but it's getting help possibly through, first of all, the group that we spoke to, but other groups involved, is identifying the people that would require that advice, and that is not something that we as a Council can do on our own, and I think we need to use our partners and other agencies in that to bring that forward. It's not just about supplying the advice to them, it's about identifying the user that would benefit from that advice. I think that is the important part, because as I say, there is a stigma about poverty and people being labelled by being in poverty, and they're unsure about coming forward to receive that advice. So that's the sort of point that I'm trying to get through.
If members are willing, rather than to put in the recommendation, I'd be willing to talk to members and Councillor Peacock and the group about exactly what shape that would take. I'd like to avoid a plethora of strategies and plans, but perhaps there is a document, a project or work that we can sharpen this for you so you can actually increase the priority. So I'm happy to undertake that work and bring it back to the appropriate committee for member scrutiny.
I'll be happy with that, Leader. Thank you.
We've got Andrew, sorry, Richard, Andrew, Andy, and then William.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I'd just like to echo the positive comments of the other members. It says in the report, progress is considered very good, and there are a lot of many things going on to tackle poverty, but there is one thing missing. That how do we know we're making a difference? We'll only know if we are achieving anything if we've got measures to say that there are less poor people as a result of our strategy, less people in the borderline. And I don't see any, or maybe I missed something, but I can't see in the action plan how you're going to measure how well we're doing as a council in tackling poverty. So I'd like a comment on that in a second. I also, on page 69, developed the family centres. That's part of the strategy, and it says we're busy with the engagement with families and communities. There has been. I think it's important that the council is aware that the engagement with communities in Annan has been how not to engage with communities. I think the elected members knew nothing about or weren't involved in the choice of schools. The head teacher, somebody turned up and told them, this is happening, we're going to take over this part of your school. The parent council didn't know anything about it. Nobody, the community council didn't know anything about it. So I just want to wonder if this happened in the other areas where the family centres have been developed. Perhaps we should have a report to the relevant committee and how that consultation took place and how we can learn from that experience.
I suppose we've gone other days when councillors have been well informed and then pass that information on to some of the communities. I take it that councillors in the area, didn't, you know, maybe yourself, Dick, you didn't engage with the communities at all, did you not? No. Liz, do you want to comment?
I'll pick up the point about how we know whether or not the overall strategy has been effective. What we bring to you every 6 months, what Harry now brings to every 6 months, is a progress report on the individual projects and the service areas that are contained within the action plan. In terms of the effectiveness about whether or not all of these things have made a difference, the strategy agreed last year that you would use something called the Social Capital Index, which has been developed for Dumfries and Galloway as a whole. That's an annual assessment, and so it was just the baseline information was agreed last year, and we'll bring that to you. The index tool was agreed last year, so the baseline information will be available this year, and we'll bring the progress to you next year.
Andy.
Thanks, Leader. Excuse me, it's about the promotion of the living wage, 3.2.4.2 on page 70. I'm just actually wondering if we've got any figures on the local authority jobs in the social care settings that were actually evaluated in the job evaluation scheme at below £8.25 and who are currently receiving a top-up. Have we any information on that? And if they are receiving a top-up, I'm assuming that will come from council budget, not from this fund, which was clearly for a different sector.
I don't have the detail on that, but I can ask Human Resources if they can give us some information about perhaps the number of staff who are receiving living wage.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair. I think the very fact that we're discussing anti-poverty strategy is an indictment on society, or rather the political process that we are going through just now. And that's not a criticism of you or the actual strategy. Reference has been made, and I'm pleased to hear what Gavin had to say, but it's the whole linking of these and what the effect is out there. Because in my opinion, we are still seeing people who are suffering from abject poverty, and it's by the number of people, an increase in the food bank that we get a report weekly on, and this is down to children as well who are suffering. And again, in terms of the linking in with credit union, to see what the effect is there. And I know that we have discussed it at the Welfare Reform Subcommittee, and again we can look at the increased numbers that are still applying for discretionary housing payments, and the very fact that we had to cut back on number of weeks that people could qualify, and so forth and so on. So it's that structure in terms of reporting, and rather than just looking at it and feeling that yes, we're moving in the right direction in the strategy, I think we've got to look at cause and effect and how we report that, so that we know that we are making a difference, although I doubt that we as a council will be able to, in terms of what people are suffering from various other government agencies and the effect that is having on them. So it's how we report the cause and effect, and whether we are making a difference to the poverty that's being experienced out there. That's what I would like to know, that we are doing that.
Harry, do you want to come
Thanks, Leader. If members refer to 3.2.3.1, there was clearly a lot of detailed work done on the back of the service review in relation to housing, revs and bends, financial advice and homelessness. And one of the things that members have agreed we take forward, and work is commenced on this, is, I guess, a better understanding across sectors, including council directorates and partner organisations, whether we fund them or not, that very much focuses on giving us a type of information that we can then make informed decisions. It also picks up on the point that Councillor Peacock made in terms of early intervention. It's much better to identify risk first and deal with it, rather than have to deal with the consequences. And we're currently working with some key partners to try and harmonise information gathering systems, etc., that will be able to keep our finger on the pulse far more effectively in that regard. So that, I think, would address the point that Councillor Scobie highlights. Thanks, Leader.
Jeff?
Thank you, Leader. Just 3.2.4, reducing the extra cost within the school day. A number of teachers and head teachers said to me how beneficial it is in removing the stigma of chasing youngsters who have to pretend they've forgotten to bring the money in to pay for the raw materials, knowing full well that the families can't afford to pay for it. So it has been very, very beneficial. Now, I've raised this at COSLA's Education, Children and Young People's Executive Group, and Stephanie Primrose, who's the COSLA spokesman on education, has actually said to me that they would like to introduce this in East Ayrshire. So our officials actually provide them with the raw material, which was handed out at the Head Teachers Conference seminar in February 2016. So I like to think that our local authority is actually pioneering this throughout Scotland.
Excellent. Good. Tom?
Thanks, Leader. I think to go back to what was discussed earlier about engaging people in the budgetary process, we tend to go out in the budgetary process, we're meeting the same old folk time and again. It's the same old two and tuppence. It doesn't actually add any value to what we are trying to achieve. I think through this, where certainly those of us who met with this anti-poverty, the TPCG group, that we met people we wouldn't ordinarily meet when we're discussing the budget. And I think that they deserve to be listened to as much as the ones who usually turn up and say, council's inefficient, you should cut this, you should cut that. These are people who actually use council services. And in fact, by meeting them, it helps their sense of resilience as well, because most of them had never met a councillor before, far less a council officer. And if you look at the connectivity we're trying to achieve around services, that's certainly something that the ward workers will be able to do on the ground. And I think that there's a good way to move forward here and address some of the issues. And I would hope that other groups might get a chance to meet with the TPCG and see the very, very good work that they're actually doing. And they're also helping themselves at the same time, which is a good thing as well.
I think that's an important point to make, Tom, about actually meeting people that use the services, people that are actually involved on a day-to-day basis, with poverty and tackling that poverty. Jim?
Thanks, Leader. A note on page 78, 4.5, promote the grants and support available for home improvements. And that appears to be in relation to insulation and energy efficiency. My question is, what promotion is taking place to provide support for structural improvements of people's homes? Because there are a number of communities which are severely blighted by certain properties and have been for years. That lowers the community's level of wealth, the perception of the community is lowered, and that contributes to overall poverty.
Harry?
Thanks, Leader. It was recently reported to the Housing Subcommittee that here in Dumfries and Galloway, we've actually got one of the highest performing local authority areas in terms of translating Scottish Government funding in this area into tangible action on the ground. And I think there's a report going to next housing sub in July, which details the impact across Dumfries and Galloway. This particular KPI is in relation to helping combat fuel poverty, but I very much acknowledge the point that Councillor McComb makes in terms of perhaps the more structural element of buildings and properties. I'm quite happy to extract that information and circulate it if it's felt useful, Leader.
That would be very welcome, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Stephen then. I'm moving on. Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. It's actually on the 7.6 million for social care staff. I mean, obviously, since this time last year, summer last year, we were a living wage employer, so all our staff get the living wage. So I'm presuming that the 7.6 million, I mean, it was referred to earlier in item 5 where this would actually be a pressure. It was implying it would be a pressure for the council, but obviously it wouldn't be because all our staff are living wage. It's just those that we contract in terms of third party provision of care at home. So it was really just to sort of get a wee bit of clarity on this 7.6 million. That's obviously health and social care partnership money. So I'm getting a wee bit unclear as to if we see this as part of our council budget, when actually it's something that's towards delivering uplifts in the social care setting, but it's not actually our staff because we're already a living wage. So I was just getting a wee bit confused there, and I would be grateful for any guidance on that.
Right, I think when we discussed health and social care and doing the strategic plan, the council will still remain legally responsible for the contracts to the care at home sector in particular. So even though the budget will transfer across to the health and social care partnership, the actual legal responsibility for the contracting still remains with the council. So it's the council's responsibility, and also in the game of the Scottish Government, to pay the living wage or have those contractors pay the living wage by October. I'm happy to report at this point that we have made considerable progress with the sector, both the care at home and the home care sector. Sorry, care at home and the care home sector, in securing a framework in which we will be able to deliver the £8.25 within the available budget. Obviously, the NHS and the statutory Section 95 officer has a huge role for health and social care, so working in partnership with them with the affordability. But the element of the 7.6, which is the half of it, our element, is available for us to deliver the £8.25. So we should be in a position to go out to tender, I'm looking towards Rona, to the sector in the next week or so. That would allow those tenders to come back and for us to have contracts in place to pay that across all of the staff in the care at home and care home sector for October. It's been a very complex matter, as members are aware, due to the fact that it's not a legal living wage. It's a Scottish Government proper living wage, so therefore that has been the complexity. But happy to say we are responsible for the contract, so we are responsible for ensuring that we have contracts in place by the 1st of October to ensure the living wage is paid to all care staff, even though the money actually lies with health and social care.
Yeah, and just before you come in there, Stephen, the budget for paying living wage outside the council as well, there's been a declaration by the Scottish Government that we pay that, and we got some money this year for that. Have we got future budgets, or is this another pressure?
Obviously, this will be consideration of the potential 3-year budget that will be set by the government this year of how they wish to take that forward. But moving out, obviously, we still wait on the procurement issues to be resolved so that we can then put councils and partners' intentions to pay the living wage to contractors and ensure contractors pay it. So therefore, we hope all that will be concluded when the new Finance Cabinet Secretary stands up for his 3-year budget, so that would allow us to really start to move. We're in a position of working with our contractors and providers to be able to implement it as soon as we get that clearance. So therefore, we are well placed to do it, but at the moment, no budgets have been agreed for future years, so therefore I think we'd have to wait to see where we go. But the good news for this council is that we will be implementing the living wage across several thousand staff from the 1st of October.
Okay, Stephen, sorry.
Thanks, Leader. I appreciate you letting me back in. I think what I'm really asking is, do any of our council staff have their living wage paid out of that 7.6 million?
No, the money was not for the council. The council had already agreed its policy within its pay structures to pay that, so therefore that was within the council's budget. This is to allow us to expand it to the wider sector, and of course we have got the lowest average wage in Scotland, so it's an enormous challenge but opportunity for us.
Yeah, and that's on top of the differentials you've got to pay as well. That's on top of the differentials, that the challenges within that and different care homes and that. Okay, there's another name sneaked in here, you've got to have to stop that. Craig, and then that's it.
Thank you, Leader. Just to come back on Councillor McComb's point regarding empty properties and derelict properties. The Housing Subcommittee actually allocated funding to provide a dedicated empty homes officer within Dumfries and Galloway. The recommendation at that committee was to support a jointly funded officer with Borders Council, but the committee recognised the significance of the problem of empty properties and that within Dumfries and Galloway, and so we allocated funding for a dedicated officer in Dumfries and Galloway to move towards tackling that. There is also a below tolerable standards fund available for properties that are in severe disrepair, and that can be accessed through application to the Housing Subcommittee as well.
Thank you for that. Jim?
Very briefly, Leader, is that information widely publicised to the community? Because a number of people would be very interested in hearing that.
Chair, the information is available on the council website, I'm sure, under the properties, but I'm sure Harry will be able to help you with that.
Alistair?
I'll crave your indulgence, Leader, and I'm grateful to you. I think with the greatest respect to Craig, the blunt fact of the matter is that the level of frustration that's experienced in communities by the failure of the council, as it were, to take appropriate action to address these problems, is the real underlying difficulty, sir. And I think we've got to get inculcated more into our officials, and I hesitate to an extent to say that, much more of a can-do attitude in addressing particular problems. This is a strategic issue. I'm not going to depart from that, to the parochial. But I think we've really got to look at that, Leader.
Thank you, Alistair. Can we note the recommendation? Shape of the Council and Progress Report. This report presents the progress made in taking forward the Shape of the Council and Programme since our last update at the end of March 2016. I'm pleased to see the continued progress in the organisation, structure and service reviews, which play a significant part in addressing the funding challenges that we face. The programme remains on track, and members will have the opportunity to review and agree service review outcomes in future months through the presentation of further service review options at Service Committee in 2016. The Chief Executive and Directors are available here to clarify any issues. Members? Ivor?
Chair, in light of the earlier report where we're now being asked to look at services that we shouldn't continue with, should we actually be stopping this process of matching some of the officers who are still to be put in place because their post may not exist in the future, as we have to cut our budgets by between 10 and 20 million?
In short, no. I'm frustrated by the length of time this has taken, but that's the council's policies. Staff have uncertainty. We need to complete the matching process. What members agreed were functions in this. So from this structure, it is actually easy to slim down from this structure with the consequence, because we've now got clarity. But we're in the middle of a process. We need now to get this down to the front end as quickly as possible to remove the uncertainty that we face. But the structure of a members' consideration was specifically designed to allow it to be like an expanding briefcase, to contract in as we anticipate it coming further forward. So it would be that point in the movement of individual functions rather than whole-scale reorganisation. So each of the structures is effectively designed to shrink by one. So in anticipation. Not that I would wish to do that, but if we have to, we don't have to go through another reshaping exercise.
Okay, can we go to the recommendations? Note and agree. Note 2-1, agree 2-2. Okay, going on to item 9, Boundary Commission for Scotland report. Firstly, can we agree to withdraw delegation from policy resources? The purpose of the report is to advise members on Local Government Boundary Commission for Scotland's final recommendation for councillor numbers and ward boundaries for the Dumfries and Galloway Council area. The report before members provides full details of what is recommended for Dumfries and Galloway by the Commission. The Commission recommends that the number of councillors in Dumfries and Galloway should be reduced from 47 to 43 and the number of wards cut from 13 to 12. The detail of these proposals is set out in appendix to the report. Members will recall that we challenged the Boundary Commission's earlier proposals and draft recommendations. However, as you can see from the recommendations, the Boundary Commission have not listened to our representations. At the COSLA leaders meeting on Friday, this came up at COSLA, and the decision was to not agree to the Boundary Commission changes. And I think they're setting up a meeting with, I forget his name now, Joe Fitzpatrick, and others, regarding this. There was a feeling, this wasn't part of the recommendations, that within the room, that even if they delayed looking at the boundary changes at the moment and do a proper review after the council elections, it might be a more meaningful paper that comes forward. There is now no statutory appeal against the Commission's recommendation, and this is now a matter for Scottish ministers to determine. As you will be aware, I have therefore written to the Local Government Minister, Joe Fitzpatrick, urging him not to agree to the proposals, reiterating the unanimous view of the Council, and copies of my letter are available for members. I think you've got that in front of you now. I did get a response, a kind of holding response, which is fine. I didn't expect an answer right away, but it's acknowledged in the letter. So there is, in addition, what's happened just now is that East Renfrewshire Council has taken the lead in preparing a joint letter as well to the Minister, Joe Fitzpatrick, and so far 8 councils have indicated they wish to sign this letter. A copy of that letter, it'll be from Chief Executives, has been given to you all again, and I would ask if we are agreed we delegate authority to the Chief Executive to sign this letter on behalf of our Council. Okay, members, any other comments on it? Archie first, then Jim, then Alistair.
Thanks, yeah. Just for, obviously, for reference in minutes and things like that, I would agree with what you say, that we do give that authority to the Chief Exec to write and say that the Council is part of this particular letter, taking this issue forward. I think the COSLA issue is something that we'll have to do a watch and brief on, making sure that our representation is actually heard within that particular area as well. So I'm happy to go along with what your recommendation is, Chair, and have the authority given to the Chief Exec.
Jim.
Thanks, Leader. Point 3 on page 111. It states there that for Dumfries and Galloway, this is a below average level of deprivation compared to other council areas in Scotland. Now that is based upon the 13 data zones which are amongst the most deprived. It is, however, a fact that 80% of our poorest people don't live in these data zones. So any deliberations based on that assumption, I'm afraid, are bound to be flawed.
I mean, that's part of the representations we're making as well, about whether it's based on deprivation or not, and how that decision was come to, but we've had no facts behind that. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that I would commend you unreservedly for the way you've fought this council's corner over this issue. Your comments have been trenchant, they've been hard-hitting, but as far as I'm concerned, they've been very much in point. Well done, you.
Thank you. Andy?
Thanks very much, Leader. Like you, Jane and Gail, I was at COSLA Leaders meeting on Friday, and it was across the whole chamber, as you know, that there was agreement on this. What I'm commending here is the letter you've sent, because it's factual and it's evidence-based. And that is what Mr Fitzpatrick needs. He can't just overturn it at a whim. He needs the evidence, and you've done that, so thank you very much.
Okay. We've got Tom then, I think.
Can I suggest maybe we have a wee look at these data zones, because this matter has been raised before when licensing boards were having meetings with the health board. These data zones are set by the Scottish Government, and they bear no relationship to the facts we know in the streets. For instance, in Dumfries, you've got one area of very high deprivation, which is then connected to another area, which is one of the most affluent areas in Dumfries, and that they call a data zone. And because they put the figures together, it does not look like a poverty area. And the health board were quite happy to work with these figures, and perhaps that's maybe why they sometimes get their targets wrong. But I really think we should be making representations to the Scottish Government. They set up these data zones without any consultation whatsoever with the local authority or the local health board. And these data zones need to be looked at, because they're skewing things against the people in this area and benefiting the cities of this country.
Can we go to the recommendations? Oh, sorry, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah, I would totally agree with looking at the data zones, but those data zones have been in place for years. Certainly since 2009, probably before that, even 2006. It's the same data zones. The data zones have never changed in all those years.
I think that if members are aware that when we sat our anti-poverty strategy, the first plank was the work of the Crichton Institute, which gave us enormous detail, like the most income-deprived area of Annandale, Nestdale's, Lockerbie, a stunning statistic. So we have shared that both directly from the council with government, but also through the universities who undertook the work as a basis for reconsideration, and when they try to identify rural as opposed to urban funding streams. So we have made that available, pushing it forward. So we wait to see how that will be taken forward in their distribution processes in the future.
Okay, and we've delegated to the Chief Executive. Okay, thanks. Item 10. This report asks members to agree the composition of the Enterprise and Services Subcommittee and appointment of a chairman. Subcommittee was included in the revised scheme of administration of the delegation to committees agreed on 24th of March. Rona and Claire are here to answer any questions arising from the report. Ronnie?
Thanks, Chair. As you mentioned, this was already agreed. I'm just formulating it today. Looking at it and being consistent I would prefer the 11-member subcommittee. It's more inclusive, which the Labour Group or the administration have always said they would be. So I would quite happy to go for the 11-member subcommittee, and while I'm on, I would like to nominate Archie Councillor Dryburgh as the chair. Thanks.
Okay, Craig.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm happy to second that nomination. I too agree. I think it's a really important committee, an enterprising committee, the first one that this council has formally adopted. And I think it's a really important committee going forward, and that's why I think there is a need to have a subcommittee of 11 to give the fullest and broadest of opinions going across that. So I would second Councillor Ogilvy's motion. Thank you.
We've got Alistair.
No quibbles whatsoever with the recommendation, sir.
Thank you. Willie?
Thank you, Chair. Similar number, moving forward with the recommendations. What I would like to ask, and I think it was raised, that policy and resources may have been raised by Alistair, was representation from the trade union side, from staff as one of our the employees being the asset to this, for this to work and so forth. I would hope we are able to co-opt a representative or representatives from the trade union side and to agree that today.
There's a motion. Is there an amendment that's been seconded? No. No. Can we agree that it's 11 and the chair is Archie? Thank you. We have a Gaelic Language Act. This is one we've had before us previously. This is a... Now that the consultation period has ended, members will recall that we requested it come back to us after that consultation period had ended. The report sets out the responses to that consultation and the changes made to the plan as a result. The previous debate at points did centre around the need for the plan, and the report advises that we are required to prepare such a plan under the 2005 Act, which is referred to. We've got Colin Grant and Liz Baxter and Andrew O'Halloran here to answer any questions. Members? Jane?
Thank you. I emailed all leaders yesterday and I suggested some amendments. I've read the 2005 Act and its guidance and the board's guidance and its 2012 to 17 corporate plan. The proposals in this plan with the suggested amendments, which I have left each group, seem to me to be reasonable and proportionate, which is what's required in the guidance, and they have a chance of being contained, I would suggest, within current costs, which I don't think is the case if you leave it as it is. The Scottish Government intends that the level of Gaelic provision provided by this Council will increase incrementally over time. So we're all going to get another chance to have a go at this in order to increase the opportunity and to expend more resource on it. So I am suggesting that we start with a plan that follows the guidance carefully, which it does indeed, and takes account of the extent to which Gaelic is used here. I would also say to members that there was an extra response, I think, which took it up to 3 to 1 against this particular plan. So taking account of the responses that have been made, it seems to me that we should be taking a very cautious view of Gaelic while entirely complying with what we're supposed to do. So I commend my amendments, which you all have in hard copy.
Thank you for that. It is our responsibility to put forward a plan, and any amendments to that plan that's in front of us, if members wish to debate that, I agree with that. Colin, can you come back on some of the points that was made there, especially on the cost-neutral basis?
We finished the consultation period and we made minor amendments to the plan.
just to do with telephones and things which we think were possibly controversial. And we're perfectly happy to look at the amendments which we haven't seen yet from Councillor Maitland.
Colin.
Can I add to that, Chair? Officers haven't seen the suggested amendments at this stage. The only thing that we're aware of is that at the moment the board were comfortable with the draft plan. Clearly, if there are suggested amendments, that would need to be sent off to the board, and we would need to feedback whether the board was comfortable with that. The additional thing I would say is that the cost neutral issue is about cost neutral to the council. Everything has been cost neutral to the council. Any funding that has been required for any of the work that's been done has been given to us by the government to support the Act, and that was continuing to be the case. So we need to be very clear that no costs have been borne by the council around this agenda.
Okay, we've got a motion in front of us from Jane and seconded by, sorry, it's George there. I thought somebody put their hand up, but so it's seconded by George. So we've got a motion to, everybody's got that in front of us, the changes. Andy?
Thanks very much, Leader, for letting me in. First of all, I think we have to thank the officer concerned who wrote this report and wrote this strategy, working with others, because this was over and above his day job. So he's gone above and beyond, and there's a lot of hard work has gone into this. This is required by a statute that was enacted in 2005, which went through unopposed. It was unanimous, and we need to have something in place. So I'm actually moving that we accept the recommendations now and just put the vote if that's what it takes.
So we have a motion and amendment. Anyone else? Colin?
Thank you, Leader. I was quite vociferous the last time against this, and I have not changed my stance one bit. Councillor Witt can call me as mad as he likes, but I have a very solid opinion on this. The forums being accepted in Gaelic, I mean, is there anybody in this country who just speaks Gaelic that doesn't speak English? I doubt it very much. So why would we want to accept forums in Gaelic and then have to pay somebody to translate that forum back into English so that other staff can actually read it? I mean, to me, that's just ludicrous. Getting onto road signs, I was up north about a month ago. It is actually, I find it quite dangerous trying to pick out in a road sign what the language you're actually looking for. It's worse in Wales, actually, because the Welsh, even the English names in Welsh are hard enough to read without being...
Leader, can we move the vote, please?
Sorry?
Move the vote, please.
No, I'll give him a say.
No. I haven't said a thing all day, so I'd actually like to have my say if it's okay with you. I don't see any need. I mean, I'm fully supportive if anybody wants to speak Gaelic in Gaelic communities or whatever, but why should the public purse be funding it or changing the way the council works, having Gaelic added to emails, Gaelic added to answering machines? It's a nonsense. Everybody that speaks Gaelic will speak English. There is no need to have a dual language society. And I would formally move that we actually just recognise that there are Gaelic speakers in the country and leave it at that. No other action is needed.
No, that's not competent. It's not competent, that, Colin, because it's by law, unless you want us to break the law, that we must have a plan in place. Now, within that plan, you know, you can try and adjust, you know, this is what we're here for the day, you know, after the public consultation. If you want to make amendments like Councillor Maitland, then you can try and make amendments, but it's got to be competent within that, and we have got to, by law, set a plan. And I think there's one in the country that's mono language. One person that's mono language, I think, in Gaelic. Yeah. John.
Thank you, Leader. I have quite a great deal of sympathy with Councillor Wiper. We have been here before, we debated this before, and we were given the same answer. By law, we need to do this. However, before I am able to vote in the motion or an amendment, I need to see what were the amendments that Councillor Maitland put forward, because I, for one, haven't seen that. And I would like to look at those first, please.
Have you got copies, Councillor Maitland? Yeah. If it's, you know, he did send them out by email, but I think it was, I'm not sure whether it's just the leaders or not. But anyway.
Hard copy in each room.
Right.
There was a hard copy in each room.
Okay. You know, we have a motion there, so I'd like everybody to see what the motion is, if that's okay. Okay.
Can we recess?
Could you get some copies, please?
Leader, are we recessing to do that?
Sorry?
Are we recessing? Are we?
No. We'll just carry on. There's others wanting to speak, so we'll listen to them.
All right. Okay.
Well, that's happening. We've got Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Leader. We had quite a lengthy debate in March on this subject. I totally agree with what Councillor Maitland was saying about the amendments, and look, obviously members need to see what that was going to implement. But Councillor Wiper does talk a lot of sense. Once again, you know, it's come to press on various occasions about this. But one thing that concerns me, obviously, it's forced upon us to have this plan for the Scottish Government, and we've no choice here today. We've got to obviously try and make some amendments to come forward to the table. But what concerns me, how much is it going to cost us, the Dumfries and Galloway Council, this area of the region, to implement this plan over a period of years through the education, through road signs? This does concern me. This is very, very important, because we've got some very difficult budget restraints to come forward next year, and so on. So that's what concerns me. So we need to have some proper costings of this.
I think we've had an answer about costings, and it's cost neutral, is it?
Yes, but I meant implementing over a period of years, not the plan.
Thank you, Leader. I think we have to look at this, and we're talking about 0.7% of the population that even sort of understands any part of this, and only 0.4% of people that actually speak it on a daily basis. So we're talking about 0.28 of the population that are actually really seriously interested in Gaelic. We've got to accept that this is a dying trade. I mean, we're going to be asked to reintroduce the slide rule in a minute, as far as I can work out. On the point of the cost neutral, it might be cost neutral to this council, but it's not cost neutral to the taxpayer. It's got to come from somewhere. And when you look at all the actions that are approved, there is a huge cost in many areas of replying in Gaelic and one thing or another. So I have absolutely no problem with people wanting to speak Gaelic, but I think they ought to be doing it at their own cost. And therefore I'd like to put a counter amendment forward that we don't agree this, and we don't forward it to the board.
Yeah, you know, as I said to Councillor Wiper, we can't do that. It's by law we've got to have a plan. And, you know, what that plan says is open to the members. But, so we cannot not have a plan. So it has to go forward unless, so that's why, you know, we can't break the law if you want. Colin?
Thanks, Leader. It might be helpful for members. We made some inquiries to the board around what the likely implications may be if a council or decided, or any public body decided not to have a plan. The advice we have is that the board would have recourse to the Scottish Government ministers in the event of any public body failing to produce a plan. Individuals within the council within this council area may have recourse to the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman, which is free at point of use to the public. There would potentially be considerable cost to the council investigating complaints as well as reputational damage. The council is a listed body under the SPSO Act 2002, and so far no public body in the whole of Scotland has failed to produce a plan. So I think that's helpful background for you in terms of the implications of no plan.
Okay, we've got Gail, then
Sorry, the last time this was brought up, I asked about budget costings ongoing, and I appreciate that it's cost neutral this year. But we aren't guaranteed funding from the Scottish Government next year to cover this. We still don't have costings, and I did ask for specific costings. I do understand that under the legislation we probably have to agree something, but at some point I would like some officer of this council to give me a list of exactly what each element of this plan will cost, so that we know going forward what that budget implication might be for our council if the Scottish Government doesn't continue to fund it.
It's my understanding that it's, what's in front of you is based on a cost-neutral incremental basis.
I appreciate that, but if it costs £287 to produce the leaflets that go into places, I want to see that level of detail. We have a scrutiny responsibility, and whether it be to the council's money or the Scottish Government's tax pound, we still have a scrutiny role. Don't need it here today, but at some point in the future I need to see that individual costing.
Okay, it's something that we can provide. We've got Ivor.
Chair, whilst we're waiting on Councillor Maitland's amendment, it was mentioned by the officer that they hadn't seen those amendments and they could send them up to, now, excuse my, is it Bordna Gaelic? And they would then, do they have the right to veto those amendments because they have agreed it in principle because we had to meet a statutory timescale? So if we then send them up, would we have to wait to hear what their view was? And in such case, we would be better deferring this report until the amendments have went up the road to see if they're suitable.
Would you like to answer that?
I think it's factually accurate that if we were to send the amendments up to the board, we would have to hear back from them as to whether those amendments fitted within the criteria required.
Tom?
I just wonder how much this has cost us for something that's cost neutral.
Sorry, behave. I was going to use another one. Jim.
Aye, thanks, Leader. We can't defer this because we could find ourselves in a position where we can't defer this because we'd find ourselves in a position where we might send them up to the board or whatever when you call it, they would agree them, and then we'd vote against them anyway. We have to decide first of all whether or not we wish to implement them, and then send them on.
Ian, sorry.
Just to say, Leader, we had all these arguments the last time, and we're now going round and round in circles again. And if I remember correctly, it was a unanimous vote in the Scottish Parliament. So, end of story.
I mean, we've got a motion. We've got a motion in front of us now, and I think members have got it. Do you want a couple of minutes to read it? Has it, you got it? It's coming round. It's coming round. Yeah, I think it's stroked out. It's just more or less. No, hang on. Yeah. You can put a plan forward, it's then up to the board to decide whether they accept it or not. So anything that comes from here is, is competent. Archie.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, we have a legal responsibility to put a plan in place. We have an opportunity here to move forward with this particular thing. Whether people in Dumfries and Galloway want to take the opportunities off that plan, that will be up to them anyway. Now, we will, as a local authority, as has been said, have a cost-neutral thing. So it will also have to go through planning if we change things like licence, the signs and all that sort of stuff. So this is a plan that's in place. Whether people want to take that up or not is their opportunity. It's their decision, not ours. We have a plan. So the situation, as far as I'm concerned, is we go with the recommendations, we get the plan out of the way, and let's move on to something else.
Once everybody else reads the motion. So has everybody got the motion? They haven't yet. No, Jane? Members asked to see the motion. Councillor Maitland said what was in the motion, but people wanted to see it, so I've obliged them by letting them see the paper.
Leader, thank you very much indeed. I see that I've got a couple of scribbles on this, which members ought to realise, of course, which don't provide part of the motion. And one of them is on page 170, which is, will involve staffing on each shift. Now, that is simply a commentary. That's a commentary and obviously is not part of the motion. Do you see in the side? So, will involve staff in each shift. It was a note to myself to think that it would be probably a cost. Page 170. So please just delete will involve staffing on each shift and the pound sign. You've got a clean copy. You've got a clean copy then, Leader. And also page 171 also has, let us dip a toe into this. And that too should not be there. But you've got a clean copy. There. You've got a clean copy. It's fine.
No. Have you got it yet? Have you got it? Have you got it yet? You read it and digested it, have you? I've got a clean copy. You've got a dirty copy. Let me share that. Okay, are members happy to continue? Yep. Colin, you want done?
Sorry, I was busy reading. I'd be quite happy to go with what Councillor Maitland's put forward here, except on page 169, I think the part about street signs should be deleted, so there is no reference to that at all. And on page 171, forums in Gaelic should not be accepted, so I'd like to see that deleted. So is there any come and go in this, or is there anybody else in agreement with myself?
John, do you want to?
Can you just repeat that, please? Just.
Sorry, Jill. Page 169, signs erected, street names, it's the bottom part, where street names are being replaced. That I would like to see that deleted altogether. And on page 171, forms will be accepted in Gaelic. I would like to see that deleted altogether. I think it's an absolute nonsense.
Ian.
Thank you, Leader. Can I ask a question on page 175? It's maybe just in the reproduction of the copy. It's the second last line. It appears to be lined through to the word the and possibly visible, and then it's clear, and then the line starts again, be used, and it really doesn't make sense the way it's shown here. It may very well be that the line's continued through, but in the copy I have here, it's not.
Jane?
It's simply that the line has not come through. The line should go right through the whole thing.
Okay, Graham, and then we'll go to the vote.
Chair, I'm actually in agreement with Councillor Wiper, about the page 169 and 171. I think it's, Councillor Maitland has put a reasonable amendment forward and a number of changes here from members. I think I'd like a counter amendment. Second Councillor Wipers, I have a counter amendment.
Yeah. And who seconded you? Who seconded you? Ian. So you got Andy. Okay, calm down after all this excitement.
Okay. We have a counter amendment which is the plan as put forward by Jane Maitland but as altered by Councillor Wiper. That's the counter amendment. And we have an amendment which is the plan as was prepared by officers. So we'll do the vote on those two options to start off with. No?
So you had a motion from Councillor Maitland, seconded by George.
Yeah.
You had an amendment by Andy, seconded by Ian. You had a counter amendment by Colin, seconded by Graham.
Yeah. So we're putting the counter amendment and the amendment up first to be voted on. Okay. Leader.
Amendment.
Deputy Leader.
Amendment.
Councillor Bell.
Counter.
Councillor Blake.
Counter.
Councillor Brodie.
Abstain.
Councillor Carruthers. Oh, not here. Councillor Davidson.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Dykes.
Counter.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Foster.
Counter.
Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy. Oh, go on, sorry. Councillor Groom. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Lever. Councillor McCottry.
Amendment.
Councillor McClung.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Abstain.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Abstain.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor Maitland.
Abstain.
Councillor Mail. Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Counter.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Peacock.
Amendment.
Councillor Prentice.
Abstain.
Councillor Scobie.
Abstain.
Councillor Stitt. Councillor Syme.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Counter.
Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
Councillor Wood.
Amendment.
Councillor Wiper. The amendment is carried by 19 votes to 12 with 6 abstentions. We will now vote on the amendment, which is the plan as prepared by officers, and the motion, which is the plan as put forward by Councillor Maitland. Okay, ready to the vote. Leader?
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Bell? No, yeah, Councillor Bell? Councillor Blake?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie?
Motion.
Councillor Davidson?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Amendment.
Councillor Dick?
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle? Councillor Dryborough?
Amendment.
Councillor Dykes?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Amendment.
Councillor Foster?
Motion.
Councillor Geddes?
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy? Oh, she's got it. Councillor Groom? Councillor Hislop?
Motion.
Councillor Lever? Councillor McCottree?
Amendment.
Councillor McClung?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McCutcheon? Motion. Councillor McGregor? Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor Mail?
Motion.
Councillor Martin?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl?
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie?
Amendment.
Councillor Peacock?
Amendment.
Councillor Prentice?
Motion.
Councillor Scobie?
Abstain.
Councillor Stitt? Councillor Syme?
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Tuckfield?
Motion.
Councillor Witts?
Amendment.
Councillor Wood?
Amendment.
And Councillor Wiper. Okay, the amendment is carried by 19 votes to 17 with 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item 12, which is Armed Forces Champion Annual Report. I welcome this report from the Council's Armed Forces Champion and the success and progress that has been achieved, and we'd like to invite Archie to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to say this is probably one of the more positive reports of today. And we as a council employer have been given a bronze award by the MOD's Employer Recognition Scheme. Indeed, when I met with Colin Boats from Defence Relationship Management, which used to be SABRE, which is Supporting Reservists and their Employers, he only wished he could give it himself when we met, but we had to apply for it. I met Colin a couple of months ago, and he advised that with what we do in this Council for Reservists and Cadets, that we should be able to get the Gold Award with a couple of added value events. Therefore, I am pleased to advise that discussions have went well so that we can apply for the Gold Award as early as the end of this calendar year. It is my intention to hold an event that the Chief Exec and Leader will be invited to attend, which will have all or most of our reservists and Cadet Force instructors, so that we can personally thank them for the service they provide in the defence of this country, or the service they provide to make young people more responsible citizens as part of the Cadet Force movement. We are in a very unusual time in politics in this country, but what stands true and ready are all of our forces to do as their elected politicians ask them, ready and willing to do our bidding whenever we ask them, ready to put their lives on the line for our security, a solid in a more fluid time. Only last week, Armed Forces Week, as part of the Cadet and the Community Week for the Army Cadets, we asked for volunteer cadets to come and paint 2 school corridors that were in need of some maintenance that would have cost the council quite a bit of money. So working with the local cadet detachment commander, funding from Chapel Cross, and myself doing the risk assessment and painting, I have to add, we have completed painting both Langham Academy and Gretna Primary School corridor in one day. This is not an advertisement for a painting company, by the way. An event appropriate for the end of the Armed Forces Week. I have to say that the cadets loved it. The head teachers have a much brighter magnolia-coloured corridor, and this will help improve, hopefully, the learning experience for our young people in those two schools. Young people helping young people. We see in Moffat the link school with the Army Cadet Detachment. I was fortunate enough to attend the presentation of their hackles, showing that they had passed their basic training ready for annual camp in Wales this year. A local member of the Moffat branch of Legion Scotland said that he was so proud of how our education department had worked with the cadets, and it was good to see a detachment back in Moffat after the last cadet detachment had closed down over 30 years ago. And the head teacher who said that she was so proud of the way the young people had taken this on and was looking forward to communicating the benefit of these young people helping out at places such as Dowding House. I too look forward to this. Leader, to be in the armed forces, you're part of a much bigger team, and I have hopefully taken that lesson into my work as a councillor and the Armed Forces Champion. The Quinton's Hill commemoration event last year shows what can happen when local communities work with the council and their councillors as a team. I have to say it was a fantastic and poignant commemoration event, but it would not have been so successful if it wasn't for the teamwork of ward councillors, community councils, community groups, and the council covering what is needed regarding a royal visit, something that local communities would find very difficult to organise. But our council worked well with those communities. The ward councillor supported me as part of the organisation, and I'm pleased to say that the subgroup, with the help of the council's overall £39,000 of grants through Area Committee and Communities Award last financial year, will now have a statue of a Gretna Munitions women worker. The objectives of our local commemoration group will have been fully met this August. The local community and sweat contributing to this fund, this would have been very difficult to achieve. So teamwork has won the day on that event, and I personally thank Councillor Craig Peacock for being my Vice Chair, Councillor Dennis Mail for his support of ensuring the history of Quinton's Hill will live on, as he presented a beautiful coal carving of the train, the Royal Scot, presented to the school at Springfield Primary, and the school child who could do the best presentation of Quinton's Hill story and children in the Victorian age. I was again fortunate enough to judge this year's winner, who I cannot advise who won, as they will be presented with us on Thursday to hold for the year. If I told you, I'd probably need an armed guard for the next few days. I will say that all the children using PowerPoint presentations from Primary 4 to Primary 7 took part, and they did a fantastic job. Also, Councillor Karen Carruthers, who has steered the subgroup for the statue, which in some cases were, of course, when you're looking for funding, enough to pull your hair out. Just glad it wasn't Councillor Ogilvie, as he doesn't have any. But as chair of the area committee, all supported along with all members of that committee that the statue will come to fruition, as I said, in August this year. I know the local community are extremely grateful for the work Karen and the subgroup have done on this. To the staff on the council who have made my life just a little bit easier when trying to organise events such as this year's Armed Forces Day flag raising parade, last Saturday's AFD parade in Dumfries, a big thank you. To all the staff who have been fantastic, too many to name, but I think they also enjoy doing something just a little bit different from normal work. Area framework staff from Wigton when organising the Louis McGuffey VC commemoration paving slab meetings with the local community council and other members of the community there, and of course the elected members from that ward as well. As I said, Leader, a common goal, and when it works well. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. We have seen some fantastic moves in helping our veteran community, and this is also thanks to Forces Charities, our Legion Scotland branches, third sector organisation in the region as part of the DG First Contact Group. I want to see this action plan move on with a simple leaflet showing what support is available for members of the armed forces who leave and return or wish to come to Dumfries and Galloway, and I'm sure I have the support of the council doing this. Finally, Leader, I could not do all this without the support of the directors and the chief exec. A huge thank you to Derek and Gavin for the support and in some cases the much needed advice, and I commend this report to the council. Before I finish here, I'd just like to remind members on the 1st of July, this Friday, at 7:30 in the morning, I'm inviting local communities to go to their local war memorial and blow a whistle 3 times for the Battle of Somme commemoration. That 3 whistles was the sign to let troops go over the top, and I'm asking communities to do that. So therefore, Chair, in closing, I have great pleasure in presenting this, as I said at the start of this spiel, the Bronze Award for Employer Recognition to the Chief Executive Council, and I know I will be doing the same next year with the Gold Award.
Thank you. And yes, there was a number of Gaelic-speaking soldiers at Watsom as well. Okay, I want to, just as a thank you again, I want to thank Archie for the considerable commitment he makes to the post of Armed Forces Champion. Archie's leadership has been instrumental in the success of the Council in relation to the Employer Recognition Scheme. His work not only reflects well in the Council, showing clearly our commitment to supporting our armed forces, but more importantly, it makes a real difference to the lives of our current and former members of our armed forces. I therefore believe we should place on record our thanks to Archie for his work. Right, can we go to the recommendations? We've considered it. Can we note the success, the reason for success? Okay. Okay, if we go to item 13, which is a notice of motion. Notice of motion was received in relation to the Council's decision to remove attendance from public conveniences. That decision being taken at the full Council meeting on the 29th of February 2016. Have been advised by the proper officer is that for the reasons detailed in the report, that the motion is not competent, and that in that it calls for action that would create an unbalanced revenue budget for 2016-17, contrary to legislative requirements and as agreed in the Council's budget process. I am accepting the advice of the proper officer on the competency of the motion and therefore would simply note the terms of the report. Moving on to item 14.
Chair, can I
it's
raise a point
finished.
of order?
I've made a decision.
Sorry, but
I've made a decision.
standing orders,
Ian,
I'm allowed to ask for a point of order.
I have made a decision as on the competency of the motion, and I've done that. Thank you. I'm moving on. Item 14, which is the minutes for approval. Anybody else interrupts, I'll ask them to leave the room. I've made a decision on the competency of the motion, so no more interruption, please, or you can leave. Item 14, which is the minutes of our approval and noting. Page 1, the Audit and Risk Management Committee.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Page 7, the Communities.
Happy move. Happy to second.
The page 17, the Crichton Subcommittee.
Happy to move.
Happy to second. DG First Management, page 21.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
17th of March, page 25, Education.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
24th of March, page 29.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Employment Appeals, 22nd of April.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Employment Appeals, 28th April.
Happy to move.
Here on page 37, I have raised this with the governor and was assured that this would be corrected. It's not a correct record of the meeting that took place on the 27th of May.
No, got to that yet. 28th April.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
27th of May 2016.
Yeah, Chair, as I said there, I thought you'd moved on to that one. I had checked with governance and there was to be an addition. It is an incorrect minute in that there was a vote taken and 5-2 where I was moved that we looked at the disciplinary procedures with particular reference to 3.1 and that is not contained within the minute. It's incorrect. I was told that that would be corrected and before us today I understood it was being withdrawn on the basis that it had not been done.
As I think Councillor Scobie knows, you don't record motions, amendments within that. And raising it at the full council, I think, out of order.
Chair, here before us is a correct record. It is not a correct record. There was a vote taken and that vote was recorded. There was a move on second on a motion and appeal and amendment moved and seconded and there was a vote taken. That is not before us. I have checked with governance and it was to be included.
So what you're saying now is that a motion should have been recorded, not particularly your motion. We'll check with officers on that. We'll check up on that. That could have been a procedural thing. I don't know, but it was almost my understanding that nothing was recorded in the minutes for obvious reasons. And I think, by recording anything in that it, it's against the rules to do that. But whether it's a procedural thing that the actual motion's been there and an amendment, then that might be, but not your name, not the motion. Right, we'll move on from that just now. And on the licensing panel, 5th April, page 41.
Happy to move.
Seconded.
13th April. 19th of May.
Happy to move.
Second.
Okay, the local review body, 3rd of March.
Happy to move. Second.
Police, Fire and Rescue sub, 12th of April.
Happy at second.
And review of schemes, a sub.
Happy to move.
Okay, and we'll check up in the minutes for the next time. I have no other business, thank you.